We're diving into a vision for a world where our entire legal framework, the laws, the prisons, the whole concept of punishment is just dissolved.
It's completely replaced.
Yeah.
And that's what this deep dive is about, right? It's this incredibly ambitious plan to find a positive, a humane way to deal with people who commit violent or disruptive acts.
And to make sure they never do it again.
Exactly.
Okay, let's unpack this. Our mission here is to explore this framework that, well, it suggests we can massively reduce crime.
Not by being tougher, but by replacing the entire punitive system with something that's completely rehabilitated.
In preventive, it's not just a reformation.
No, it's a total societal reboot. And the core reason the sources think this is even possible, it comes down to one fundamental idea.
Okay.
The idea that violence and wrongdoing, they're not innate. They're not built into us.
Learned.
Entirely learned. They're behaviors we develop in response to, our environment or our needs not being met.
Wow. Okay, so if that's true, if bad behavior is just a reaction, then the whole point of justice just flips on its head. The goal isn't to punish the reaction anymore.
No, the goal is to remove the causes of the reaction.
You don't treat the symptom, you cure the disease.
You eradicate it. You eliminate the catalysts that create the need for that kind of behavior in the first place.
And that actually sets us up perfectly for the first big idea here.
Yeah.
How you go about eliminating those catalysts.
Right.
And the sources are really clear on this. You can't fix the justice system without first fixing the economy.
It's the absolute prerequisite. The sources basically identify our current monetary system and the consumer culture that comes with it as the single biggest engine for crime on the planet.
So to beat that, the proposal is to implement what they call a resource-based economy, an RBE. We should probably slow down on that because that's a huge concept. What does that actually mean in practice?
Well, in essence, it means you get rid of money. You eliminate currency as the middleman.
So all goods and services, housing, food, education.
Everything.
Yeah.
It's all available based on need and what the planet can sustainably provide, not on who has enough money to buy it. Production and distribution are optimized just for human well-being.
Okay, and this is where the analysis gets really compelling. Because if you do that, if you just remove the need for money,
you immediately win a decisive victory over this massive portion of all crime.
All the stuff that exists purely for financial gain.
Exactly. Think about it. Corruption, drug trafficking, human trafficking, theft, fraud, organized crime syndicates.
Their entire reason for being is profit.
And if the profit motive is gone, those crimes, they just lose their entire logical basis. They just sort of evaporate overnight.
It's an elegant idea, but I can hear the objection already. If people don't have to work for money, why would anyone work at all?
That's the classic question, right? And the sources counter that by saying the very nature of work would change completely.
Yes.
With automation handling all the basic survival stuff, human work shifts. It moves towards contribution, invention, art, research.
Things people are actually passionate about.
Precisely. You gain status and fulfillment from what you create or discover, not from what you accumulate.
Okay. But that economic shift has to be propped up by something else, right? What about all the non-financial crimes?
It absolutely does. And that's where the equally profound changes in education and society come in.
Right. They say education has to pivot, moving away from just memorizing facts.
And towards mastering problem solving, analytical thinking.
Yeah.
And this is the critical part, empathy, emotional intelligence.
So you're teaching people how to understand systems, how to understand each other.
And you combine that with total freedom, the ability to travel, to live anywhere, to create without constantly worrying about rent or food.
You're basically engineering a society of people who are more secure, more stable.
And when you remove the pressures of poverty and inequality, well, the rates of violence, of hate crimes, of crimes of passion that are driven by all that anxiety, they would have to plummet.
And that scales up globally, too.
It has to. In a world without borders where resources are managed for everyone, war and conflicts over land or oil just become
More logical.
unnecessary and illogical.
Yeah. Okay, so before we get too lost in this potential utopia, the sources spend a lot of time on a really harsh critique of what we have right now.
Yes, and it's a powerful indictment of the current global justice system.
It starts with a pretty simple but cutting observation.
But our laws are almost entirely reactive.
Right. They only punish people after they've already committed a crime.
They do basically nothing to change the conditions that created the offender.
So it's a system for what? Retribution, management. It's not for actual improvement.
And the sources argue that this whole reactive machine is fundamentally broken. They single out the judicial system in particular.
Saying it's one of the most corruptible institutions.
Yeah, that it's driven by bribes, by extortion, by the influence of wealth and power.
And even when you take out the blatant corruption, there's a systemic flaw, isn't there?
A huge one. Judges are forced to follow the strict letter of the law. They don't have the tools or even the mandate to look deeper.
They can't investigate the psychological or social reasons why someone broke that law.
Their job is just to assign guilt and a sentence, not to find a cause and prescribe a path to healing. The whole process is just, it's bureaucratic.
And then after that failure, the system doubles down with the prison environment. The sources are brutal on this point. They talk about the immense trauma, the dehumanization.
And the practical result.
Yeah.
Inmates come out stigmatized, but more importantly, they've just spent years inside a networking event for professional criminals.
And often exposed to abuse from the very people meant to be guarding them.
It's that negative feedback loop we talked about. You take a damaged person, put them in a traumatic environment where they learn even more destructive behaviors.
And then you release them, and you're surprised when they're less able to function than when they went in.
It's absurd when you lay it out like that.
The sources have this one medical analogy that it really sticks with you.
I know the way you mean.
They say our justice system works like a doctor who only treats symptoms. You've got a deadly infection spreading through the body.
But all the doctor gives you is Tylenol for the fever.
Exactly. You get some temporary relief, the fever might go down for a bit, but the actual disease.
The underlying pathology is just ignored. And it keeps spreading. The crime is the fever, the infection is the societal failure. And until you treat the infection, the fever will always come back.
So if the current system is just Tylenol for the fever, then this next section is where the sources lay out the actual cure.
Right, the radical treatment.
And the new mission for society becomes finding out why. Why did an individual resort to this specific harmful behavior?
And then making the changes. Personal, local, global, whatever it takes to make sure it doesn't happen again.
This is where punishment is just. It's taken off the table completely. It's replaced by rehabilitation.
And not the kind of rehabilitation we talk about today. It's a whole different environment. Instead of jail, a person would go to a specialized housing complex.
Which the sources describe as a mix of a school, a training ground, and a center for applied psychology.
And these aren't prisons. They're not about containment. They're environments built purely for focused personal growth.
And the program inside is intensely personalized.
Oh, completely. Every single resident works daily, one-on-one, with their own psychologist and an assistant. This isn't, group therapy once a week.
It's constant, targeted intervention.
It's a deep dive into their own psychology to get to the root of the trauma, the neglect, the learned helplessness, whatever it was that created the destructive behavior.
And the education is tailored, too. Maybe they need emotional literacy. Maybe they need job training. Maybe it's advanced ethics.
And a huge part of it is healing relationships, reconnecting with family, finding a new, constructive purpose in life. The whole environment is built on honesty and trust.
And they aren't isolated. They can talk to loved ones. They have access to information, creative tools, fitness centers.
Because physical health is seen as essential for mental health. It's a holistic approach.
Now, this all sounds incredibly idealistic, but the sources actually point to a real-world example to show it's not pure fantasy.
Yes, they point to correctional facilities in Norway,
which use much more humane psychological methods. Their focus is all on preparing people for release, not just punishing them.
And the result? Norway has the lowest recidivism rate in the world. It's powerful proof that this approach, or at least a version of it, is profoundly effective.
That real-world proof makes the standard for release in this proposed system seem, well, at least a little more plausible.
Because it's an incredibly high bar.
It's not about time served at all. Release is based entirely on a demonstrated, verifiable transformation.
Exactly. The person has to prove a complete understanding of what led them to their harmful acts.
They have to show the sources say, a sincere determination and will to reject that behavior.
And have a clear, viable plan for their future.
But that raises a huge question for me. Sincere determination. How on earth do you verify that?
That's the challenge, isn't it?
How do you know it's a real, lasting change and not just someone saying all the right things to get out?
Well, the sources acknowledge that difficulty. And that's why the process doesn't just stop upon release.
Oh,
Even after they're reintegrated, they continue to meet with their psychologist. It's about long-term support and accountability. It's like an early warning system to prevent a relapse.
all right. So that covers a lot. But what about the people who are, well, beyond reasoning? People with severe mental disorders who can't be reached by psychology alone.
That's treated as a completely separate issue. It's a medical problem, not a correctional one.
So they're handled by doctors and therapists.
In state-of-the-art facilities that are designed to be humane and therapeutic, the architecture itself is part of the treatment.
The sources get really specific here. They talk about large gardens, fountains, relaxing music.
Yeah, and they cite the scientific proof of the calming effect these things have on the nervous system. They even mention the Historic Health Museum in Idern as an example of this being known for centuries.
So the goal is just safety and comfort. A secure environment where they can't harm anyone, but they're still close to family.
Exactly. It's care, not confinement.
And if we sort of pull the camera back, all of this healing and support, it has to rest on a foundation of a society that is just rock solid.
Utterly stable. Which is why system integrity is so important in the source material.
The city's support systems, power, water, data, they all have to work flawlessly.
So the basic needs are never ever a source of stress or a motive for crime.
And if something does go wrong, a glitch, or even an act of vandalism,
The system has to have immediate countermeasures. It has to analyze and repair the damage almost instantly.
which in itself is a huge deterrent. If you know the system will just heal itself right away, what's the point of trying to break it?
The act becomes functionally pointless. It's ineffective.
It all builds to this ultimate hope, doesn't it? That a truly evolved society would have not just zero tolerance for destructive acts, but an overwhelming demand for a lasting psychological resolution for every single instance.
A demand for healing, not for revenge. They want to transcend the whole cycle.
So to try and bring this all together, it's a monumental shift.
It's moving from a society driven by money and punishment, which really just masks symptoms,
To a society based on resources and prevention that focuses entirely on psychological and educational healing as the only form of justice.
Yeah, that's the core of it.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? I think it means challenging our most basic assumptions about what punishment is even for.
Mm-hmm. Is the justice system's job to inflict pain? Or is its job to ensure every single person can be safely and successfully brought back into society?
The sources are very optimistic. They predict that in the future, our current crimes will only be seen in history books or movies.
Right, as examples of what not to do.
But let's go back to that incredibly high bar for release, that sincere determination and will to reject harmful acts. It's the ultimate psychological hurdle. If we're really moving past a system of time served, what are the specific, measurable, observable steps you would need to see to truly verify that sincerity? To know that change is real and will last, not just in a controlled setting, but years later when they face real stress again. That's something to think about as we close out this deep dive.